ברוכים הבאים להערת שוליים, הפודקאסט של אוניברסיטת חיפה. אני נתנאל שלמוביץ, והיום אנחנו בפרק מיוחד בשפה האנגלית עם נשיא האוניברסיטה היוצא, פרופ' רון רובין. Welcome to הערת שוליים, University of Haifa's official podcast. And today we have a very special episode. We're going to say farewell to our president, Prof Prof Robin. We're going to ask him, how do you fund a medical school and a new hospital for Haifa? How do you create a middle class out of nowhere? And why is he going to China? All that and more today. So, how did you get into academia?
I won't tell you how I got into academia. I'll tell you how I survived academia.
How did you survive?
It's much more interesting.
Okay.
So this is the short version of the story. When I arrived here at the university, I managed to get on the wrong side of a couple of very important people here. And I found myself after 4 years with an ultimatum. You need to publish a book immediately with a top-rate press. You have a year to do it. And if you don't, you're out.
Wow.
So I immediately took a sabbatical, went back to the place where I feel most comfortable, which was UC Berkeley, sat in an office, produced the manuscript, but I couldn't find a publisher. And here came the month of August. I'm sitting in an office of a friend, quite depressed, not knowing what my future was going to be, and the phone rings. And on the phone is a man. He says, may I speak to Professor Haber, the owner of the office? I said, Professor Haber's not here. And then he turns to me and he says to me with all the sincerity of a used book salesman, your voice sounds really familiar. Can I come up and talk to you? Well, I wasn't in the mood to do any work, and I said, of course, come up to see me. He knocks at the door. I open it up, a man in a crumpled grey suit, sweating profusely, and I say to myself, book salesman. And he walks into the office and he sits down and he says, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Edward Tanner. I'm the chief editor of Princeton University Press, and I've come here to Berkeley looking for manuscripts. It's summer, there's nobody around. Perhaps you have one? And I gave him the manuscript. I actually forgot all about it. 4 months later, he called me just about as we were about to leave Berkeley. And he said, I hope you haven't given this manuscript to anybody else. I've given it to readers, and they love it. And so I came back to the university and survived.
And you survived. And what was your biggest challenge in your work in the university?
Here at the university?
Here at the university.
Well, the University of Haifa is a new university. It's the youngest university, actually.
In Israel.
In Israel. It is a university that is limited mostly to the social sciences and the humanities. No university can survive without having the gamut of professions within its precincts. It's also a very poor university, and poor universities behave in a manner which is cultural, the culture of poverty. There are fights over resources that should not happen in a university. There are fights over academic development, something that should never happen in university. It's been very difficult to put the university on a path where it actually happens to be right now. It took a long time, and there are lots of battle scars.
And so that's the main challenge.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did you deal with it?
Somebody once described university administration as a very unusual type of leadership. You are leading an institution which is characterized by organized anarchy, which basically means that everybody here is an independent agent. And in order to institute change, you need persuasion. And you need to persuade people almost on an individual basis, definitely on a departmental basis. You cannot move forward without troops. I can have a wonderful idea and rush forward, and I'll look behind me, and there'll be nobody there. And that is the greatest challenge, really, of making change. It took a long time. The first 4 years were, I would say, years in which I made very little progress. It was the second batch of 4 years, my second term, where I managed to persuade people that the change needs to be instituted now. We need to have more technology. We need to move towards the field of engineering. We need to have a medical school. All this is happening as we speak right now.
And since we're talking about your second term, I was interested in it mostly because I was thinking you're a historian. Right?
Yeah.
That's what you're known for. You've written books and articles. You've mentioned one of those books. Did any of that prepare you for your second term, which is, history is unfolding with COVID and wars and all of that?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I mean, I write about the past, and you have a certain detachment when you write about the past.
Yeah.
And you never sort of internalize that it can actually happen to you. And so crisis after crisis, and there were many. We know about COVID. Of course, we're aware of the war that we're now trying to come to terms with. But the attack on freedom of expression, which has been quite dramatic over the last few years, it was all theory. It was absolutely theory, and coming to deal with it on a personal basis or an institutional basis was very difficult.
So being a historian is not the way to go to
Not
see it.
really, not really. I mean, you do, look, there is insight. But the insight is basically, let me tell you a story, perhaps to give this. I used to teach, the best course I ever taught here was Introduction to Modern American History. It was a wonderful course that I loved teaching here. And a lot of it dealt with World War II, the immediate aftermath, the beginning. And you have on paper these great figures, right? Roosevelt, Stalin, Churchill. And you think to yourself, these were magnificent people, which of course they were. But when you dive in and you try and understand what happened in those people, that period, you find three very old and tired men waking up every morning, surprised by events, and improvising. So that is the lesson of history. You have to be on your toes.
So you did learn something.
Yes, I learned that you have to improvise. Try not to be surprised by too many events. Try and anticipate some of them. And rely on the fact that this job is all about persuasion.
And coming back to the university, what's so special about Haifa University? Why this university?
Now you're going to repeat that question. What's so special about the University of Haifa?
I keep getting that. I'm sorry. And why Haifa? Why the University of Haifa? What's so special about this place to you?
Well, first of all, this was my first academic job, so I owe this place a deep debt of gratitude. That's to begin with. The other thing is, beyond academics, we are creating a new middle class which will serve this country well in the future. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but you mentioned I'm an historian, so I think in long terms. And I know that we are creating here a middle class which is embracive of all the groups in Israeli society, which provides avenues of access to professional trades for each and every group among the various tribes in Israeli society. And that is going to change our society dramatically as we move forward. I'll tell you a story. I like telling stories, as you can see.
That's what we're here for.
Okay. Which I think characterizes what we're doing over here. So a few years ago, we lived in the center of the Carmel, just behind the auditorium. And it was high holidays, and it was Yom Kippur. And as you know, in a secular city, in Yom Kippur, it's somewhat carnivalesque.
Yeah.
The stores are closed, there are no cars, there's nothing like that. Bicycles, skates, people screaming at the top of their voices, having the greatest time on earth.
Yeah.
So my wife and I go out onto Stirat HaNasi, I think it's called, and we go out there and we see what we've seen years before. Children on skates and bikes and parents pushing prams and whatever. But it sounded different. It was the amount of Arabic on the street. So Haifa has always been a very stratified city. But it used to be stratified very clearly, Arabs at the bottom of the mountain, Jews on the top. It's now stratified socioeconomically. And those who have professions, whether in medicine or in academia or any other profession, law, they live on top of the mountain irrespective of whether they're Arabs or Jews. And that is a tremendous accomplishment that nobody had anything to do with it except those who provide education. Education is the key to changing society. Haifa is, I hope, a crystal ball that suggests how we can do this in other parts of the country. It's not going to happen in Jerusalem for other reasons we can discuss.
Yeah.
But this is what universities do. This has been our biggest accomplishment. We have created a broad middle class which can survive any crisis you can think about because we share a certain amount of what I'll call middle-class Western values. I don't have a better name for them.
That's a good name.
Yeah.
And what are you most proud of your 2 tenures here?
I'm very proud of the expansion of our academic footprint. We now, as you know, have a campus downtown in the port where we deliver all our technological professions. I'm extremely proud that we're going to have a medical school, that we've integrated WITSO into the university, that we're going to change the city by virtue of our students being everywhere. There are lots of advantages to be on top of the mountain, but we are not Cornell. We can't be sort of isolated somewhere, detached from our surroundings. We have to be in and of the city. We have to be integrated.
So when you mentioned before the stratification of Haifa,
Yeah.
was that the reason to put the campus downtown, where the more poorer areas of the city?
One of the reasons. The other reason was to be close to, was to do a Beersheva. If you remember, Beersheva's great attribute is being close to a railway station,
Sure.
pulling people in from all parts of the country.
Yeah.
So being close to the Metronet, the bus service, which is like a light railway basically, and to the train station was something very important. The other thing was to be in an area which is attractive to young people, and the port, and eventually we'll start moving towards Hadar, I think, extremely attractive to young people. And in addition, it was urban blight. And part of the university's mission is to transform cities and to transform areas, and that's what we do.
And what's in store for the University of Haifa?
So we're at the transformative moment for the university. The introduction of a medical school is going to have significant changes on the way we deliver curriculum, on the way we prepare our students for life, on the way we prepare people for future in medical professions in general. We here are not going to recruit typical students. We will recruit students who don't necessarily have the highest test scores, but they have an element of curiosity in their background, which is very important for us. Maybe they took off time to travel to faraway lands. Maybe they took off time to learn a to learn a musical instrument. Maybe, I don't know what, they volunteered for something. These are the type of students that we're going to be looking for. We're also going to be a medical school that is tied to an HMO, to the largest HMO in Israel, which is Kupat Cholim Klalit. The hospital that will be built in the near future in the Krayot will be our university hospital. We will work in the clinics in the north, and we will probably provide a tuition-free education to every student who's prepared to stay in the north and work for the community in the last frontier of Israeli society, which happens to be the north of the country.
Yeah. And that sounds like quite an investment.
Oh, yeah.
How did we pull that off?
I don't know how many people are going to believe this, but in the last 6 months, we have raised $70 million in 6 months. Wow. $70 million for this adventure. We actually put off this podcast for a few days because I went for 3 whirlwind days to the United States, where I met a very prominent couple. The name I'm afraid I can't mention right now.
I won't ask.
Who over lunch gave us $10 million. This happened like 3 days ago.
Sounds like a good lunch.
It was a great lunch. Although when they said it, I almost choked on my kale. So, but we are well on our way to funding this very expensive enterprise, which will have a transformative effect on everybody, on our university, on the city, on the north, on the country.
And my final question would be, what would be your advice to the university community, your successor, and mostly the community of the university.
Yeah, I hate handing out advice. It sounds like, that uncle at the Seder who's always handing out advice to the young people there. The people who are
yet he gets invited.
And yet he gets invited. Well, the great advantage that we have here is that the new team are transitioning in from positions of leadership. Mm-hmm. The new president, Professor Gula Rui, was the rector. We worked together for 3 years, and the transition is going to be flawless.
And what would the advice be then? Or is that between you guys?
Keep your eyes on the prize. Don't lose sight for a moment of these huge developments here at the university, particularly the medical school, introducing technology. It's easy to get distracted by current events, by what other universities are doing. Ehud Barak, when he was in charge of, or the commanding officer of Sayeret Matkal, used to have a saying. It was, the enemy is just a rumor. And that's what you have to bear in mind. Maybe the word enemy is a little strong here, but everything else that happens around you is just a rumor. Keep your eyes on the prize. Do what you set out to do. Make the necessary adjustments that need to be made. But we know how to make a great university and never lose sight of it. And since we worked together for 3 years, before that he was a dean, we worked together as well, I'm sure he's going to pull that off. The great other advantage is the new rector of the university, Professor Mona Maroon, who is currently the vice president for research. Once again, an easy transition for a rector who's been involved in the strategic developments of the university. So I don't need to give too much advice other than don't be distracted. You know what you have to do. Just don't be distracted.
And what would you like to say to the students and the faculty of this university that you've led for the last 8 years?
Wow. I've led an amazing group of students and faculty who have weathered one crisis after the other. Let's just say a word about the last crisis, December 31st, 2023, when we opened the doors of the campus after the events of October 7th and the ensuing events. I could see we were very extremely worried, you can imagine. Jews and Arabs coming together after months of being apart and the events that affected everybody, Jews and Arabs. Everybody was affected. We were extremely worried. And you could see in the body language, both of the students and the faculty, when they came in here, this relief, the shoulders like dropping, and saying, wow, we have a routine, we're back home. I could literally see it in the eyes of students, and when students we spoke to, they had this feeling that something familiar had happened, and they were back home. Yeah. And I'm extremely proud of the manner in which we've managed this, that we've pulled this off under circumstances which are difficult to describe to an outsider who has not witnessed them in person. And with a faculty like that and with students like that, we can't go wrong. Let me just add a word about our incredible supporters. We would not be able to pull off what we're doing right now and what we've done in the past without the kindness of strangers and people who know us well, including people who know us well. We have an incredible group of people who have provided the necessary funds for the university to develop in the manner that it's developed. Some of them are engaged in our board of governors. Some of them are not, but have supported us. All of them understand the importance of a university like ours, creating the new middle class of Israeli society. I could not end this podcast without saying a deep thanks to all of them from our collective Haifa heart.
That's nice. And what's next for you?
So, middle of September, I shall be leaving the university, and I am moving together with my wife for 3 months to Shanghai, where I will be working at NYU Shanghai, which is a campus that I built many years ago as part of my previous job. We're going through a number of transitions at that campus, and I've been given the august title of Senior Advisor to the University Leadership, and I'll be leading some of those changes in the campus over the next, until the end of the calendar year. I'll be there. Quite exciting to go back to a place where I was deeply immersed and to use the skills that I've accumulated here at Haifa to make NYU Shanghai an even better place than it is right now.
And then you're coming back?
And then I'm coming back. I have my grandchildren here and my children live here.
So you're not moving to China?
Not at this point, no.
Okay. So we'll see you back. So we'll see you when you come back.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Thank you for coming on, Professor Robin.
Thank you. My pleasure.